All right, everyone, we made it to the end. We made it to the finale of Game of Thrones. This is the last time we do this. This is the last time that I get to review an episode of this show because it is now over. And while I don't think I've really had enough time to process everything that's just gone down, while I don't really think I've had enough time to navigate and assimilate more ideas on this episode, I think I know how I feel and what I think about this as a finale of this show. So let's talk about it. I don't want to start this review by going through things beat by beat. I want to start with a broad, bigger picture idea. And it's that obviously season 8 has been incredibly divisive. Some people have loved it, some people have hated it, and some people have found themselves in the middle of the road. Now, obviously I'm someone who's been more in the love category, though I think I've still been, I don't want to use the term critical, but there's been a lot of decisions where I think things could have been done way better. And I actually think that's what overall the criticisms come down to. The ideas themselves not being terrible, the ideas themselves actually being pretty good, just they're not given enough time or enough justification or enough build up. And so how I feel about the finale is I love the finale. I really connected to it and I loved pretty much everything that it did. If you take the finale on its own almost, it's truly a wonderful piece of television, though the issue lies in the fact that basically all the pillars that are in that room that are supporting that ending are the ones that I think George Martin intended to be there. This is always more or less how he saw the story ending. And what I think the problem is that the writing along the way, in the limited number of episodes, in the extended look at battle sequences over growing character dynamics, we lost the setup to have those pillars constructed with any foundation. And so while I like the season as a whole, while I love this finale, I think that what it's built upon isn't as strong as it should have been, and that is where the problems lie. I hate being a downer, so let's reset a bit. This episode was every bit as operatic and devastating and bizarre and thoughtful and provocative as a finale of Game of Thrones should be. I really think that this was an incredibly sound finale, an incredibly emotional finale for those of us who were able to connect with it. And as much as I have questions about some things that happened, I've got questions about what ended up happening with who rules over Westeros, I do really think that they kind of stuck the landing despite everything that came before. While D&D's writing can certainly be called into question, I don't think we can doubt their directing at all. At least I can't. I thought their direction of this episode was stunning. Their use of incredibly powerful imagery to visually communicate the ideas that were written on the page, to expand on those things. There was absolutely fantastic stuff in that first half hour and last 20 minutes, particularly the stuff with Daenerys addressing her army and it having a very, very kind of Third Reich feel to it. The shot of Drogon's wings unfurling behind her was just stunning. That's one of the most iconic shots I think I've ever seen in television. And I think it gave this episode a fantastic sense, particularly at the start, of this being the end. Things don't get bigger or more important or the stakes don't get higher than this. And so I think their directing choices were incredibly sound. Just an incredible amount of empathy for the characters and a very, very strong understanding that this was goodbye. Quite often shows have finales that just feel like another episode, and I think that's fine for some shows. It does work for some shows. But with this finale for Game of Thrones, it really felt like a grand conclusion to me, and I really, really appreciated that. Now, of course, Daenerys has become the topic of most of the debates surrounding the writing in this show, and while I've said that I totally believe that she would end up at this point, that I believe it was the logical conclusion for her character. What was she going to do? She was going to have this successful campaign overseas and then come over to Westeros and everyone be like, yo, yeah, you're queen now, she sits on the Iron Throne and that's that. That was never going to happen. And I think she's always had these elements in play in her character to get her to this point. Though, I don't think the show wrote her into the position she ended up at the end as effectively as it could have. This is why the show needed at least an extra episode across both season 8 and season 7 to spend time growing her to this point. I buy it, I believe it, but it was nowhere near as strong as it could be. There was a way to do it where I think everyone could have been on board. And yes, it's incredibly difficult seeing a character that you've fallen in love with go down this path. Game of Thrones is about that. It's about that difficulty in watching the people around us change. Sometimes they change for the better, sometimes they change to become worse. But I think there was a way the show could have written it so that not only, like, it's going to be devastating no matter what, but there was a way it could have been done to make it more believable. Like, we weren't kind of reaching far out to grab something that felt distant and pull it into her character and then make that who she is. It is a sad ending to a character that we fell in love with. It does hurt, but I think it makes sense. And it was crushing seeing Jon have to do that, you know. And there's interesting questions to be said about, you know, I do see a lot of questions going around about the way this season has treated its female characters. But I do believe, you know, Sansa at the end of the day, Queen in the North. But I do believe that what happened to Daenerys was always supposed to happen. It was always going to end that way. And I think it was right. Tyrion, for much of the last 2 seasons, has also found himself in a very, very bizarre position from a writing perspective. So many of his judgment calls have turned out to be terrible ideas. And so the fact that in this episode he was able to say, look what I've brought about, and throw away being the hand of the king and accept his fate almost for what he'd done, I thought was an excellent idea. And the conversation that came from that between Jon and Tyrion may end up being one of my favorites of the show. And it hurts, I guess, is the thing that I want to come down to. These 3 characters between Daenerys, Jon, and Tyrion who had been through so much to get them to this point. You know, they've survived the whole show. And for it to come down to that, it hurts. And I think it's supposed to. I don't think we're supposed to finish watching this show and go, yeah, everything's great. You know, everyone lived happily ever after and it was fine. And it does hurt that Daenerys is the one that had to fall. That things went that way for her. And again, it just all comes down to the fact the writing did not get her to the position we needed to be in for it to not feel like something was robbed from us. I don't think that's the feeling that we're supposed to have. I think there's meant to be a realization. There's meant to be a point where we go, hang on, what she's doing's not right. But it felt like it was like the carpet was ripped out from under us so fast, and then we've been left to kind of pick up the pieces and go, oh yeah, well, she did do a bunch of sketchy stuff. And Tyrion did talk about that. Tyrion spoke about the fact that she's taken out a lot of evil men. And then there's a line that's being crossed in her anger and rage. And I think some justification was made in that conversation between Jon and Tyrion, but I don't know if it was enough. I do want to jump back quickly to say that the sequence of Tyrion walking through an incinerated King's Landing and seeing all the destruction Daenerys had wrought was truly incredible stuff. Some glorious filmmaking, just that slow build. It wasn't building to reveal Tyrion finding Jaime and Cersei together, which was just a fantastic moment. You know, I've always had a lot of empathy for Cersei despite her being terrible, a truly terrible human being. And as I said in last week's review, I liked the fact that they were crushed under the weight of everything they destroyed and broken and brought on themselves. You know, they literally brought that upon themselves. And the fact they were literally crushed by it, I think, was a fantastic metaphorical idea. I like the fact that that's the way they went out. I like the fact they came into this world together and they left together. and Tyrion finding them there was fantastic, but I just liked that slow, thoughtful pacing of the opening of this episode, letting us really soak in the destruction that Daenerys had brought about. Just really, really beautifully directed. Everything to do with Drogon was handled fantastically this episode. Just some of the most iconic shots of the series. I, for some reason, was expecting him to burn Jon, and then obviously Jon's not going to burn because he's a Targaryen. But I think that's also the thing. I think that's why Drogon realized he can't burn another Targaryen. He can't take another Targaryen out. And so his melting of the Iron Throne was glorious. One of the most incredible moments of the show, just visually spectacular. I love the representation of burning the throne to the ground. And then you followed up with a scene with them picking a new king who's going to sit on the Iron Throne or whatever they pick, which is weird. I do want to say I think that's weird. And I think Bran is a great king. I think he's a fantastic idea for a king. But I just don't know. I like the fact that Jon doesn't get to, come back to everything. There's no punishment for, what he did. There was no, oh yeah, I'm just going to come back and I'm going to be the king now. I like that route was not taken. I like that he returned to the Night's Watch, to the wildlings, to the people who he's always found the most common ground with. I think that is incredible. But I do have to question, Sansa gets to rule the North. I thought she might have ended up being queen at the end of things. Sam brought up the democracy, and I was like, oh wow, they're really going to go down that route. They literally burnt down the throne. They're going to build up a democracy, and then everyone laughed it down, and I was like, okay, so they're not doing that. So I guess my question lies in this iconic moment of Drogon burning down the Iron Throne and then them still picking a king. Does feel kind of weird to me. Though with Daenerys out of the picture, I think it was fantastic seeing all these survivors, all these characters who have been through so much, all of these people who I feel are mostly good. Even Robin, I feel like from the Vale, I feel like despite being a spoilt brat kid, I think he always had it in him to be a good person. I think all that stuff was always there. He was just a spoilt brat. And so seeing this collection of people around Tyrion as he's about to be judged, I think seeing them all there and seeing that they understand diplomacy and understand empathy, I think that's the best state to leave the world of Game of Thrones in. There will always be evil men, right? There will always be terrible people. But at least now I feel like the world is left in a position where they can choose, where someone who is terrible won't get into power. And that might be optimistic thinking, I don't know, but I think that's the state we left the world in. There's something, unfortunately, that Daenerys did say, we'll leave the world better than when we found it. And, while those words, unfortunately, were lost on her, I think the people left behind have a real shot at making the world better. Even Bronn, as a master of coin, what an ironic kind of position for him to end up being in. But I think there's worse kinds of, Bronn is a selfish person, but I don't think he's a bad person. And I think he's shown that. And so the people sitting at the table at the end of the day, counseling Bran, who will hopefully make a better, I think they would have, here's the thing. I think there could have been a stronger focus on the population. I know Daenerys wiped out most of King's Landing, but I think a focus on the people. What happens to the people now? Yes, these are still the lords and ladies that rule over them, and they're going to do their best to debate and to decide things together. But I think it's important to see how the people on the ground react to that. They've been the people that have been in the middle of all of it. And so that would have been something I would have liked to see, though I'm not devastated that we didn't get it. The final farewell between Jon and his Stark siblings was, man, I seriously didn't just tear up. I practically cried. I thought that was really wonderfully done. It's so great to see that they were able to overcome everything that they went through to get to that point. And I think at least Sansa and Arya have been so consistently characterized throughout the show to get them to this point. They're the strong survivors. They're the ones that made it through. All the Starks are. The Starks have been survivors. They've been people who have actively working to just keep their head above the ground. They know what it's like to suffer, and so they're in a fantastic position now to lead. 3 of them are now leaders. It seems like Jon returned to being Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. And so seeing them as leaders and seeing Arya being a pioneer, someone who's going to move into the next world, find what's over the horizon. I love that stuff. I really, really loved their goodbye. I think that mutual understanding that they'd all, getting emotional talking about it, that connection to see that they'd all endured and overcome everything. I think that was amazing. Oh, I gotta stop crying in reviews. Jesus. I think what I'm trying to say is that overall, I found this to be an incredibly effective finale. I found it incredibly satisfying and I loved it, despite there being so many foundational problems along the way to get us here. But where we ended at overall, I thought was almost everything it needed to be for me. And while unfortunately there were things that we lost along the way, and there was stuff with the White Walkers and the Night King that I've got more questions than answers about, that I feel like could have been taken further. I feel like we needed that extra 1, 2, 3, 4 episodes, a whole nother season. I don't know. I know that things weren't perfect to get us here, but I think I'm able to walk away from Game of Thrones being able to say that I still love the show, that I loved where it ended up, that I love that the show decided to look forward in the future, to say there's a future for everyone left behind. And it hurts when we think, looking back at all the people we lost along the way to get there. But where we are now, there's a lot of possibility, and I think that's a wonderful point to end on. And so I want to end this review by saying thank you to all of the people behind this show for making it happen. I haven't spent much time talking about the actors, so I just want to go out and say that I appreciate every single one of them. They have been the true heavy lifters on this show. Even when the writing might not have been up to par, the actors have done their best to basically perform the hell out of what they're given. And when the writing's really been good, it's shown. And so Peter Dinklage, Emilia Clarke, Kit Harington, Sophie Turner, Maisie Williams, just everyone, but it's too long to list everyone, but the entire cast has always been fantastic. So first of all, thank you to them. Thank you to all the wonderful directors who have done some truly incredible work on this show. Thank you to all of the editors, the cinematographers, the visual effects teams, the production design teams, the art direction, makeup, prosthetics, the visual effects guys, the music department, the sound design departments, just everyone involved in this show has really done a fantastic job. And while the writing hasn't always been up to par, for the vast majority, it's been some of the best writing on TV. And so I guess thank you to the writers as well for giving us this show. And thank you to George R.R. Martin for building this incredible world that we've been able to indulge in for the last couple of years. So it's been a long time. So the show's been around for a long time, and I think it's going to stick with me for a long time. And so, yeah, if this is goodbye, I've had one hell of a ride. The journey has been fantastic, and I'm just happy at the end of the day I get to walk away from this saying that I still love Game of Thrones. So those are my thoughts on the finale of Game of Thrones. This is goodbye to the show, and I just want to say thank you so much for watching my reviews of it. It's been absolutely fantastic being able to talk about each episode and engage with you guys about it. I've loved hearing what you have to say about every episode, even when we disagree. I really value hearing what other people think about the stuff that we consume. I think it's fantastic. So I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this episode. Please let me know know. What made Game of Thrones special to you? What did you love the most about the show? That's 100% the type of thing I want to be hearing after we've reached the finale. Even if you didn't love the show, in the end, I want to know what made you connect with it at the point that you did. I think we should celebrate that right now. So if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, you can do so down there somewhere. You can also check out my other channel, Loverboy Media, over there somewhere. You can follow me on Twitter at Loverboy Media and on Instagram at Breaking Banter. And if you do really want to help support this channel, you can support on Patreon. Thank you so much to you guys that are doing that. You guys are beautiful people. I love you all. I love all of you guys that watch these videos. And well, I'll see you in whatever's next.